I'll never forget the day I came home from deployment and saw that letter taped to my door. My hands were still trembling from the long flight, my boots still dusty from the desert. But when I read the words, foreclosure notice, everything inside me went cold. How could my land, the one I'd worked for years to pay off, be gone? See, before I left for deployment, I'd built a small home on a 5-acre lot in a quiet suburban community. The HOA there was new, but they promised peace, privacy, and order. I didn't care much for HOA rules, but I signed the documents like everyone else. I figured it was harmless, just a formality. But while I was overseas, fighting for my country, those same board members were scheming behind my back. According to the letter, my property had been legally acquired by the HOA at an auction. The reason? Unpaid HOA fees, less than $200. $200 for land worth nearly $500,000. I thought it had to be a mistake, some clerical mix-up maybe. But when I called the county office, the clerk's words hit like a hammer. Sir, your property has already been transferred. New ownership recorded 3 months ago. The HOA had sold my land while I was deployed overseas, and I had no idea. I went to the subdivision office, still in my uniform. The HOA president, a smug, red-faced man named Richard, met me with a smirk. You should have paid your fees, soldier, he said. We followed protocol. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. That phrase haunted me. I'd missed birthdays, comfort, home, to serve my country. And when I returned, the people I trusted had stolen from me under the thin veil of regulation, but they made one mistake. They underestimated who they were dealing with. Because while they thought I was just a simple veteran, I still had something far more powerful than lawyers or money. I had connections, military connections. And before this story ends, those same smug board members would be standing in the dust, watching every house in their precious subdivision get repossessed by the US military itself. But first, I had to plan my counterattack. Carefully. Quietly. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smug grin on Richard's face. The HOA president who sold my land while I was deployed. They thought I'd just accept it. They thought I'd walk away quietly. They didn't know who I was. Back in the service, I handled logistics for base operations, land management, equipment storage, supply chain routes. I knew how military property records worked. And more importantly, I knew how to move assets legally and efficiently. My mind started connecting dots faster than my anger could catch up. If the HOA could use loopholes to take my land, I could use the system and my military background to take theirs. First, I made calls. Old friends from deployment, now stationed in the Civil Engineering Corps, Military Land Acquisition Division, and a few in legal command. I explained everything. At first, they thought I was joking. Then I sent them the documents. Within a week, I had a plan, Operation Reclaim. The subdivision had been built partially on land leased through a federal easement years ago, meaning the military still had partial claim to its perimeter. When the HOA expanded illegally and modified drainage systems, they encroached on that government-owned boundary. It was a legal time bomb they'd never noticed. So I triggered it. With the help of my contacts, we filed a federal review on the subdivision's land use compliance. That started an automatic suspension of all HOA transactions within the affected zone. The notice was delivered within days, certified, stamped, and very real. I wish I could have seen Richard's face when the men in uniform showed up at his office, asking to see property blueprints. They froze his accounts. They impounded the HOA's vehicles. And then came the inspections. Environmental, construction, and tax. Every violation they'd buried over the years started crawling into daylight. Suddenly, they weren't so smug. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, observing, collecting data. I wasn't doing this for revenge, not yet. I was making sure the law was on my side before the final strike. Within 3 weeks, the HOA's paper empire began to crumble. Investors pulled out, tenants panicked. Even the county inspector started asking questions. All I had to do now was finish what I started, because the next phase of Operation Reclaim would hit them where it hurt most. Their money and their name. The morning the first front gate was padlocked, the neighborhood felt different. Lawns were the same, cars parked the same, but there was a hush, like air before a storm. Word traveled fast. People who once waved at the board now crossed the street to avoid eye contact. Richard's empire didn't collapse overnight. It unraveled stitch by stitch into something fragile and exposed. The Federal Review unearthed permits signed under dubious names, drainage alterations that violated easement rights, and liens the HOA had used to bluff homeowners. A county judge reviewed the evidence and placed a temporary receivership over the HOA's assets. That was the legal equivalent of yanking a rug from under someone dancing on it. I watched from the edges like a predator sizing up a target. I could have stormed the gates and shouted victory, but this wasn't about theatrics. I wanted the outcome to be bulletproof, immovable by appeals or money. The receivership appointed an independent manager who ordered a forensic audit. Accounts scrubbed for years revealed transfers to shell companies, payments to contractors who never finished, and a mortgage-like lien on common grounds. Homeowners were confused at first. Then they started asking questions, opening envelopes, pulling files. People who had once trusted the board compared notes, and the comparisons were ugly. Lawsuits sprouted like weeds. A class action formed. Local attorneys who'd longed for a headline circled like vultures. Richard hired expensive counsel, but his defense meant little when the audit showed forged signatures and inconsistent minutes. As pressure mounted, some board members flipped. They gave statements, signed confessions, and handed over access to accounts. Others begged for leniency. A few tried to flee, selling properties at a discount and moving away like thieves at dawn. The Subdivision's community centre, once the pride of the neighbourhood, was placed under lien, then auction notice, then lock. It became a symbol, not camaraderie but betrayal. But the most satisfying moment wasn't the civil suits or resignations. It was the quiet reclaiming of title documents. One by one, homeowners received certified copies of deeds restored, annotated with corrections, and stamped to reflect reversal of illegal transfers. My name appeared back on my property's chain of title like a sentence finished right. Neighbours who once avoided me now nodded with respect and offered tentative, quiet help. Still, the fight wasn't fully over. There were appeals to manage, penalties to negotiate, and reputations to rebuild. Richard wasn't yet behind bars. Criminal probes take time. Yet the balance had shifted. The HOA's power had been dismantled, and the community began whispering about restitution. The subdivision was nearly silent the day I finally walked back through the gates, my gates. The HOA signs were gone, stripped from the posts. The manicured lawns looked wild now, but for the first time it felt real. No rules, no threats, no smug faces handing out fines for mailbox colors or grass height. Just homes and people trying to live in peace. My house stood waiting for me. The same porch, the same cracked step I'd meant to fix before deployment. But this time there was a new sign out front, property of my last name, reinstated by federal order. That sign meant everything. It wasn't just land. It was justice. When I stepped inside, dust covered everything. The walls smelled faintly of paint and old wood. I sat down on the floor, in the same spot where I'd packed my deployment bag years ago. Back then, I'd left this home believing I was protecting freedom somewhere far away. Turns out, I had to fight for it right here too. A week later, Richard was arrested. The audits led straight to his personal accounts. 6 figures in management fees, quietly rerouted through fake invoices. He'd taken from everyone, not just me. Fraud, embezzlement, racketeering. The charges stacked like bricks. When the sheriff's office escorted him out of the same building where he'd once laughed in my face, I didn't feel joy. I felt closure. The military inquiry concluded too. The easement land was repossessed under the government's jurisdiction for violations of federal boundaries. Technically, that meant the subdivision's shared properties, the clubhouse, the roads, and the office were under temporary military control. The same soldiers Richard mocked now guarded what used to be his kingdom. Within months, the subdivision restructured into an independent association, one led by homeowners, not tyrants. They reached out, asking if I'd serve on the new board. I declined. My fight wasn't about control. It was about accountability. Instead, I used my experience to help other veterans, those who'd lost homes, land, and dignity to the same kind of greed. We built a small nonprofit, Operation Reclaim, named after the mission that started it all. It helps service members understand their property rights. Even when they're thousands of miles from home, every sunset here feels earned now. The same wind that once carried the desert's grit across my face now brushes the grass. Outside my porch, I sit there watching the land I fought for twice and think some wars aren't fought overseas. Some are fought right here in the places we call home. And sometimes victory doesn't roar. It just breathes. If you enjoyed this story of justice served, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss another epic revenge story. Drop it justice served in the comments if you believe karma always finds its way. And if you've ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA, tell us your story below. Your experience might be featured in our next video. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is lawful justice.